Most people think survival is about the moment everything collapses. The blackout, the riots, the empty shelves, the panic. But that part doesn't last very long. What actually breaks people is what comes after. Month 3 is where survival stops feeling temporary. That's the point where the excitement disappears. The adrenaline disappears. Hope starts running low at the same speed as food, batteries, medicine, and patience. And the dangerous part is, by then, there are no dramatic headlines left. No constant emergency alerts. No feeling that someone is about to fix things. Just silence. Long, heavy silence. By month 3, the world doesn't look destroyed in the way movies show it. Buildings still stand. Roads still exist. Houses still look normal from the outside. But the systems inside those places are gone. And modern people are not mentally prepared for what life feels like once systems disappear for long enough. Because civilization is not just buildings and technology. Civilization is routine, predictability, the belief that tomorrow will function roughly the same as today. Once that belief disappears, people begin changing in ways they never expected. The first month of collapse feels completely different. In the beginning, most families still think they're experiencing a temporary emergency. People talk about recovery timelines constantly. 2 weeks, maybe a month. Maybe things stabilize after supply chains catch up. Maybe the government restores the grid soon. Everyone still speaks the language of normal life because psychologically, they still belong to the old world. That's why the first month is driven mostly by adrenaline and optimism. At first, neighborhoods still feel alive. Generators run at night. People stand outside discussing rumors and updates. Families cook freezer food before it spoils. Children still laugh sometimes because adults are still pretending things are manageable. Grocery stores empty quickly, but people assume trucks are coming. Even power outages feel temporary in the beginning because modern people have experienced disruptions before. Storms, blackouts, supply shortages. The brain categorizes collapse as another temporary inconvenience because accepting anything larger feels psychologically impossible. That optimism changes how people use resources. Families continue eating normal portions, continue using batteries casually, continue wasting water in small ways because emotionally they still expect resupply. They still think the future looks familiar. That's the hidden danger of month 1. The body feels stressed, but the mind still feels protected by memory. People remember comfort so clearly that they assume comfort is coming back soon. And during those first weeks, communities sometimes become more cooperative instead of less. Neighbors share information. Someone with a generator lets others charge phones. People trade canned food. Families check on elderly residents nearby. Humans naturally move toward cooperation during the early stage of disaster because social trust from the old world still exists. And hope makes people generous. But underneath that cooperation, small changes quietly begin spreading through everyday life. Stores stop restocking completely. Medicine becomes harder to find. Gas stations stay empty longer. Internet becomes unreliable. Refrigerators stop working. Fresh food disappears first. Then frozen food. Then variety itself disappears. Meals become repetitive. Simple. Practical. The silence also changes during the first month. At first, quiet feels strange but temporary. Then it starts feeling heavy. Modern life is filled with constant background noise people stop noticing after years of exposure. Traffic, air conditioning systems, television sounds through apartment walls, distant sirens, music. Electricity itself creates noise. Once power disappears long enough, entire neighborhoods become unnaturally silent at night. And human beings are deeply uncomfortable with silence because silence means uncertainty. That's usually when sleep begins changing. People stay awake later, wake up repeatedly during the night, listen carefully to sounds outside. Every unfamiliar noise feels important now. A dog barking somewhere in the distance, footsteps outside, a car moving slowly through a dark street. The nervous system begins staying partially alert, even during rest, because deep down, people understand something dangerous is happening, even before they fully admit it consciously. By month 2, the emotional atmosphere shifts completely. The excitement is gone. The sense of temporary adventure disappears. Survival starts becoming repetitive, heavy. Supplies are visibly lower now. Medicine cabinets look emptier. Fuel becomes precious. Families begin hiding how much food they still have, because uncertainty changes human behavior quickly. Conversations become shorter and more careful. Neighbors stop casually discussing resources. Doors stay locked longer. Windows stay covered at night. And that's when people begin realizing something important. Society is not restarting. It's slowing down. The second month feels psychologically exhausting because people are caught between two realities. Part of the mind still wants to believe recovery is possible. Another part is already adapting to permanent instability. That conflict drains people emotionally. Humans can survive incredible hardship if they believe it ends soon. But uncertainty is much harder to endure, because uncertainty keeps the nervous system trapped in constant tension. By the end of month 2, neighborhoods become noticeably different. Streets are quieter. Fewer cars move. People avoid unnecessary travel because fuel matters now. Some families leave searching for relatives or safer areas. Others stay inside almost constantly. Children become quieter too. They overhear conversations. Watch adult behavior change. Sense fear even when nobody explains it directly. Homes also begin changing psychologically. They stop feeling like places of comfort and start feeling like defensive spaces. People move furniture strategically, reinforce doors, store water in containers across rooms. Candles and flashlights become emotionally important because darkness no longer feels temporary. And the longer systems stay down, the more people begin realizing how physically demanding survival actually is. Everything takes effort now. Water must be carried. Food must be rationed. Heat must be preserved. Nothing happens automatically anymore. That constant effort slowly exhausts people in ways modern life never prepared them for. And then month 3 arrives, not with chaos, not with explosions, with exhaustion. That's the moment survival changes completely. Because by month 3, people are no longer reacting to collapse. They are living inside it. By month 3, survival stops feeling like an emergency and starts feeling like a permanent condition. That psychological shift changes everything. During the first weeks, people still wake up expecting updates, solutions, signs that systems are recovering somewhere beyond their neighborhood. But after enough time passes, the brain slowly stops waiting. Not because people lose intelligence, because emotionally, hope becomes exhausting. The human mind cannot stay suspended between panic and optimism forever. Eventually, it adapts. And adaptation after month 3 is not dramatic. It's quiet. People stop checking dead phones every hour. Radios stay on lower volume. Conversations about recovery happen less often. Nobody says it directly, but most survivors begin understanding the same thing at roughly the same time. The old world is not coming back anytime soon. Maybe not at all. That realization changes the emotional atmosphere inside homes immediately. The first thing survivors notice after month 3 is exhaustion. Real exhaustion. Not tiredness from missing sleep for a few nights. Something deeper. Physical labor now fills every part of life. Modern society normally hides labor behind systems. Water comes through pipes. Heat comes through vents. Food arrives packaged and ready. Trash disappears automatically. Electricity powers thousands of invisible tasks people never think about. Once those systems disappear for long enough, survival becomes physical again. Every gallon of water matters because someone carried it. Every warm room exists because someone conserved fuel carefully. Every meal represents effort, and effort slowly wears people down. The body changes first. Weight loss becomes common even among families with food remaining because diets become smaller and less nutritious over time. Protein becomes rare. Fresh food almost disappears unless local communities establish farming or trade systems quickly. Most survivors rely heavily on rice, canned goods, dried food, beans, oats, whatever lasts longest. Hunger no longer feels sharp like skipping meals during normal life. It becomes constant background pressure, a dull awareness that never fully disappears. People also begin thinking about food differently. Before collapse, food was comfort, entertainment, habit. After month 3, food becomes mathematics. Calories divided carefully. Expiration dates monitored obsessively. Portions reduced quietly. Parents pretending they already ate, so children can have slightly more. Entire conversations revolve around preserving supplies because running out no longer feels hypothetical. And the psychological effect of repetitive food is enormous. Humans underestimate how emotionally connected they are to variety. Eating the same meals repeatedly for months slowly drains morale. Coffee becomes emotional. Sugar becomes emotional. Small comforts carry enormous psychological weight because they remind survivors what normal life used to feel like. Something as simple as fresh bread or fruit can trigger powerful emotional reactions because the memory of ordinary life becomes painful after enough time passes. Sleep changes too. That's one of the most damaging parts of long-term survival. By month 3, very few people sleep deeply anymore. The nervous system remains partially active all the time. Survivors wake repeatedly throughout the night, listening for sounds outside. Footsteps, raised voices, vehicles moving slowly, dogs barking in the distance. Every unfamiliar sound immediately feels important because danger no longer arrives through official warnings or visible systems. It arrives suddenly and locally. That constant alertness slowly damages people psychologically. The body never fully relaxes. Even inside their own homes, survivors remain cautious. Windows stay covered. Flashlights stay nearby. Doors stay reinforced. Some families begin sleeping in shifts because uninterrupted sleep starts feeling unsafe. Apartment buildings become especially stressful because privacy disappears after months of collapse. Thin walls mean everyone hears movement, arguments, crying children, coughing, cooking, everything. And silence itself becomes emotionally heavy. Modern people are surrounded by constant noise during ordinary life. Traffic, music, air conditioning, crowds, machines. Collapse removes most of that sound. Entire neighborhoods become unnaturally quiet after dark. No streetlights, no televisions glowing through windows, no distant highways, just darkness and silence. And human beings are psychologically uncomfortable with prolonged silence because silence creates uncertainty. The brain begins searching constantly for danger inside every small sound. That's why people begin avoiding unnecessary movement at night completely. Darkness after month 3 feels different than ordinary darkness. It feels larger. Streets once considered normal become psychologically threatening because nobody fully knows who is still out there or what desperation has turned them into. Trust weakens slowly during this stage, not instantly. Most survivors still want cooperation, but scarcity changes social behavior over time. Families stop discussing resources openly. Neighbors become polite but careful. People watch each other differently now. Someone carrying extra supplies draws attention immediately. Someone looking too hungry creates tension automatically. Human beings are deeply social creatures, but long-term instability rewrites social instincts around survival instead of openness. And the hardest part is that everyone understands this silently. People become quieter after month 3. Conversations shorten. Emotional energy becomes limited because daily survival already consumes so much mental attention. Every task carries pressure now. Cooking, conserving batteries, filtering water, staying warm, avoiding illness, managing waste. None of these problems are dramatic individually, but together, they create constant psychological weight. Children change noticeably too. Kids adapt behaviorally faster than adults, but they absorb emotional tension constantly. They notice parents whispering more often. Notice adults checking windows repeatedly. Notice the absence of ordinary routines. Schools disappear. Celebrations disappear. Birthdays feel strange. Holidays become emotionally painful reminders of the old world, rather than comforting traditions. One of the darkest parts of survival after month 3 is realizing how quickly human beings emotionally adapt to instability. Behaviors that once seemed extreme begin feeling normal. Carrying tools everywhere, avoiding strangers, hiding food, whispering at night, rationing medication, checking locks repeatedly before sleeping. The brain rewrites normality surprisingly fast because adaptation is how humans survive psychologically. And the people who adapt best are rarely the strongest physically. They're usually the calmest. The people who accept discomfort fastest. The people capable of functioning without constant emotional reaction. Because long-term survival punishes impulsive behavior severely. Anger wastes energy. Panic causes mistakes. Aggression creates conflict. Survivors who remain emotionally controlled generally last longer because survival after month 3 is not about dramatic heroism. It's about endurance. Daily endurance. Quiet endurance. The ability to wake up every morning inside uncertainty and continue functioning anyway. And after enough time passes, even the idea of temporary collapse begins disappearing from people's minds entirely. After month 3, homes stop feeling connected to the outside world. That separation happens slowly at first, then all at once. During normal life, homes are part of a larger system. Electricity flows in, water flows in, information flows in, deliveries arrive, trash disappears. Emergency services exist somewhere beyond the walls. But after enough months without functioning infrastructure, the house begins feeling isolated, almost like a small survival island, surrounded by uncertainty. That psychological transformation changes how people see every room around them. Living rooms become sleeping areas because families stay close together at night. Kitchens become storage centers, filled with carefully organized supplies, containers, candles, water filters, batteries, tools. Bathrooms become stressful because sanitation is no longer automatic. Bedrooms lose privacy because survival forces people into shared routines constantly. Every part of the house becomes practical. Nothing remains casual anymore. And the first thing that truly controls daily life is temperature. Cold after long-term collapse feels different from ordinary cold because there is no reliable escape from it. During normal life, people experience cold temporarily. You walk outside, turn up the heat, get into a warm car. But after months without stable electricity or fuel, cold becomes permanent background pressure. Entire families begin living in one room because heating multiple spaces becomes impossible. Blankets cover windows, towels block cracks under doors. Furniture gets rearranged to trap warmth inside smaller areas. People sleep wearing layers of clothing now. Breath becomes visible indoors during winter mornings. Fingers stay stiff longer. Simple tasks take more effort because the body constantly burns energy trying to preserve heat. And because food is already limited, cold accelerates exhaustion quickly. Survivors learn that warmth is no longer comfort. Warmth is energy conservation. But heat can become equally brutal in warmer climates. Without power, homes trap humidity and stale air. Nights stop bringing relief. Fans no longer exist. Refrigeration disappears. Sweat becomes constant. Sleep becomes shallow and uncomfortable because the body never fully cools down. Skin infections increase. Dehydration spreads faster. Entire buildings begin smelling different after months without proper ventilation or sanitation systems. And water becomes the center of everything. Modern people are psychologically disconnected from how difficult clean water actually is to obtain without infrastructure. Turn a faucet during normal life and water appears endlessly. But after month 3, water becomes labor. Carrying containers, boiling questionable supplies, filtering rainwater, conserving every cup carefully. Entire days begin revolving around obtaining, storing, and protecting water, because running out is catastrophic. Bathing changes first, then laundry, then hygiene itself begins collapsing. At first, people still try maintaining ordinary cleanliness routines, because psychologically, those routines preserve dignity. But survival slowly forces efficiency instead of comfort. Drinking water matters more than washing. Soap becomes valuable. Clothing gets reworn repeatedly. Towels stay damp longer. Small odors inside homes become constant because airflow, water, and cleaning supplies are limited. That decline affects people emotionally more than most would expect. Cleanliness during modern civilization represents stability and control. Once homes begin feeling dirty no matter how much effort people make, stress increases dramatically. The environment itself starts feeling psychologically exhausting. Cooking changes too. Before collapse, cooking was background routine, something casual. But after months without stable fuel or electricity, every meal requires planning. Firewood must be gathered carefully. Fuel must be conserved. Cooking smells become security concerns because food odors travel far through silent neighborhoods. Even boiling water becomes strategic because smoke, light, and smell attract attention. And attention becomes dangerous after month 3. That's one reason survivors begin making homes darker intentionally. Windows stay covered day and night. Light leakage at night feels risky because visible light means resources. A lit house suggests batteries, fuel, food, activity. People become cautious about appearing comfortable because visible comfort during scarcity attracts curiosity. Curiosity can become threat surprisingly fast. The emotional atmosphere inside homes changes because of this constant caution. Families whisper more often. Movement becomes quieter at night. Doors stay locked automatically. Everyone develops routines around security, checking windows before sleeping, reinforcing entrances, keeping tools nearby. These behaviors eventually stop feeling unusual and begin feeling normal. Children absorb this tension constantly. Kids notice when adults become quieter. Notice the stress around food preparation. Notice parents pausing at unfamiliar sounds outside. Over time, children adapt too. Play becomes quieter. Questions become more serious. The emotional energy inside homes changes because survival removes the feeling of long-term safety entirely. Illness becomes another constant fear after month 3. Not dramatic outbreaks necessarily. Small sicknesses, fevers, infections, dental pain, coughs that don't go away. During normal civilization, people psychologically rely on healthcare systems without thinking about it. Pharmacies, hospitals, antibiotics, professional treatment. Once those systems disappear long enough, even minor health problems create enormous stress because nobody knows how serious they might become. A small cut becomes dangerous. A fever becomes worrying. Pain becomes psychologically heavy because treatment options are limited. That fear changes how people behave physically. Survivors move more carefully now. Injuries carry higher consequences. People conserve energy because exhaustion weakens the body further. The pace of life slows down dramatically because rushing creates mistakes. And mistakes after month 3 are expensive. One of the hardest parts emotionally is the constant awareness that nothing resets anymore. During normal life, people recover psychologically because systems restore stability automatically. Bad day at work. Go home. Sick for a week. Medicine helps. Storm passes. Power returns. But long-term collapse removes the expectation of recovery. Every problem now stretches forward indefinitely, and humans are not mentally designed for indefinite stress. That's why routines become psychologically sacred after month 3. Survivors create structure obsessively because structure protects the mind. Morning water checks, evening security routines, inventory counting, cleaning tools, organizing supplies repeatedly. Small, predictable actions reduce anxiety because they create tiny islands of control inside an uncontrollable world. And eventually, survivors begin realizing something deeply uncomfortable. They no longer miss luxury the most. They miss certainty. The certainty that systems work. The certainty that tomorrow resembles today. The certainty that help exists somewhere nearby. Once certainty disappears for long enough, human psychology begins changing permanently. After enough months of collapse, fear changes shape completely. In the beginning, fear feels sharp and obvious. Empty shelves, blackouts, panic buying, sirens. But after month 3, fear becomes quieter, more psychological. Survivors stop fearing one dramatic event and start fearing slow deterioration instead. Running out slowly, weakening slowly, becoming isolated slowly. The nervous system remains active constantly because the threat is no longer temporary or visible. It's woven into everyday life. That constant pressure changes human psychology in ways most people never experience during normal civilization. One of the first emotional changes is emotional flattening. People stop reacting strongly to things that once would have terrified them. Another burglary nearby, someone disappearing from the neighborhood, a family leaving in the middle of the night. During the first month, events like that create panic and endless discussion. But after enough time passes, survivors acknowledge bad news with silence instead of shock, because emotionally they are exhausted. That exhaustion becomes one of the defining realities of long-term survival. Not physical exhaustion alone, mental exhaustion, the kind created by constant awareness. Every decision now carries consequences. How much food to eat, whether to use batteries tonight, whether to risk traveling farther for supplies, whether someone can be trusted, whether illness is serious enough to justify using medication. The human brain was never designed to make survival-level decisions constantly for months without emotional fatigue. And eventually, people begin conserving emotional energy the same way they conserve food. Conversations shorten, arguments decrease, not because tension disappears, but because nobody has energy left for emotional conflict. Families spend long periods sitting quietly together, Because silence becomes easier than discussion, the old world begins feeling emotionally distant now, almost unreal. Grocery stores, traffic, restaurants, phones, streaming videos, social media. Ordinary life starts feeling like a memory from another lifetime, rather than something that existed recently. That psychological separation is actually part of adaptation. People who stay emotionally trapped in memories of normal civilization often suffer the most because comparison becomes painful. Every memory reminds them what has been lost. Long-term survivors slowly stop comparing reality to the old world, constantly, because the mind protects itself from hopelessness by accepting the new environment psychologically. That acceptance changes behavior. The pace of life slows dramatically. Modern civilization trains people to move quickly all the time. Notifications, deadlines, entertainment, endless stimulation. Collapse removes almost all artificial stimulation, leaving survivors alone with silence and repetitive routine for enormous amounts of time. At first, this feels unbearable. Eventually, many people adapt to the slower pace because overstimulation itself begins feeling stressful after months of hypervigilance. But loneliness intensifies during this stage. Modern humans underestimate how emotionally dependent they are on ordinary social interaction. Casual conversations, crowded public spaces, shared routines. Seeing strangers living normal lives nearby. All of those things quietly stabilize the human nervous system. Once society disappears for long enough, survivors begin experiencing a strange emotional isolation even when surrounded by family. Because stress changes communication. People stop discussing emotions openly. Practical concerns replace emotional conversation. Water, heat, food, security, supplies. Most interactions revolve around solving immediate problems. Gradually, entire households begin functioning more like survival units than families. Efficient, controlled, quiet. Children notice this transformation deeply even if they cannot fully explain it. Kids adapt behaviorally faster than adults, but emotionally they absorb tension constantly. They notice adults becoming emotionally distant. Notice the silence during meals. Notice how quickly parents react to noises outside. Over time, children stop asking certain questions because they sense nobody has reassuring answers anymore. One of the darkest psychological effects of long-term collapse is how quickly humans normalize abnormal behavior. Actions that once seemed extreme slowly become ordinary through repetition. Carrying tools constantly, avoiding eye contact with strangers, whispering at night, sleeping in shifts, hiding supplies inside walls or floors, double-checking locks repeatedly. The brain rewrites normality surprisingly fast because adaptation is how humans survive mentally. And people begin changing socially too. Some survivors become emotionally numb, others become highly reactive. Small frustrations create disproportionate anger because stress lowers emotional resilience over time. A spilled container of water, wasted food, a dead flashlight battery. Minor mistakes suddenly feel enormous because resources are limited and recovery is uncertain. Aggressive personalities often deteriorate fastest after month 3 because anger consumes energy quickly. Aggression narrows thinking. Emotional reactions create dangerous decisions. Long-term survival environments reward patience far more than dominance. Calm survivors usually endure longer because they preserve mental stability instead of constantly fighting reality emotionally. The people who adapt best are rarely the strongest physically. They're the most psychologically flexible. The people capable of accepting discomfort without panic. The people who stop expecting fairness. The people who conserve emotional energy carefully. Because survival after month 3, it's about functioning inside it. That distinction changes everything. Many survivors begin experiencing emotional numbness during this phase, not because they stop caring, but because the brain cannot maintain constant fear forever. Eventually, emotions flatten into routine awareness. Survivors still recognize danger, still protect family, still feel grief and stress. But emotional reactions become quieter internally because emotional intensity is exhausting when sustained for months. That's why long-term collapse often feels emotionally muted rather than dramatic. Movies portray survival as constant action and chaos. Reality is usually slower, heavier, filled with waiting, routine, and psychological pressure. Most days are not dramatic. Most days involve repetitive survival tasks performed under constant uncertainty, and uncertainty becomes the hardest thing for humans to endure long-term. Pain has definition. Fear has definition. Uncertainty does not. Nobody knows how long collapse lasts. Nobody knows whether systems recover eventually. Nobody knows if conditions worsen next winter. That uncertainty traps the nervous system in continuous low-level stress because the brain keeps searching for stability that no longer exists. Eventually, many survivors stop planning far into the future entirely because thinking too far ahead becomes emotionally overwhelming. People focus on immediate survival windows instead. Today, this week, maybe next month if supplies allow. The future shrinks psychologically because shrinking the future makes survival feel more manageable. And after enough time passes, communities themselves begin transforming into entirely new forms of society. After month 3, communities stop behaving like neighborhoods and start behaving like survival ecosystems. That transformation is one of the most important psychological shifts in long-term collapse because humans cannot survive alone forever. No matter how prepared someone is initially, isolation eventually becomes dangerous. Supplies run low. Skills become limited. Illness becomes unpredictable. Over time, survivors begin realizing that long-term survival depends less on individual strength and more on human relationships. But trust after collapse becomes both valuable and dangerous at the same time. That contradiction reshapes entire communities. During the early weeks, people cooperate naturally because old social behavior still exists. Neighbors share information. Families help each other. Communities organize around temporary optimism. But after several months of scarcity, cooperation becomes more selective. Survivors begin calculating risk constantly. Who has resources? Who might become desperate? Who can actually contribute something useful? Social trust slowly transforms from casual friendliness into strategic evaluation. And the emotional atmosphere changes because everyone understands this silently. By this stage, survivors can often recognize each other immediately, just through behavior. The way someone moves, the way they scan surroundings, the way they avoid discussing resources directly. Long-term collapse creates a shared psychological language built around caution. People stop wasting words, stop volunteering information freely. Every interaction becomes layered with silent observation. Some communities adapt surprisingly well. Small groups form around shared labor and practical cooperation. One household handles water collection, another repairs tools. Someone with medical knowledge becomes extremely valuable. Older people teach food preservation techniques younger generations never needed before collapse. Skills begin replacing money as the foundation of social value. That's one of the strangest transformations after month 3. Modern status systems disappear quickly. Before collapse, value came from careers, income, appearance, education, social image. Long-term survival reorganizes value entirely. Suddenly, the most important person in a community might be someone who knows how to repair generators, purify water, grow food, treat infections, preserve heat, or stay calm during conflict. Practical knowledge becomes survival currency. And because survival requires cooperation eventually, small local systems begin forming naturally. Informal trade appears first. Batteries exchanged for medicine, food exchanged for labor, water filtration supplies traded for fuel. Communities slowly rebuild tiny versions of civilization because humans instinctively organize when isolated long enough. But not every group becomes cooperative. Some communities deteriorate into fear and territorial behavior instead. That usually happens in places where scarcity becomes severe quickly, or where leadership collapses entirely. Once trust disappears completely, paranoia spreads through entire neighborhoods. Outsiders become threats automatically. Armed groups form around resource control. Streets develop invisible boundaries everyone understands silently. Crossing into unfamiliar areas becomes psychologically dangerous because nobody knows how strangers will react anymore. And violence, after long-term collapse, rarely looks dramatic at first. It usually begins quietly. Stolen supplies, break-ins at night, people disappearing during travel. Small confrontations escalating because everyone is exhausted and emotionally unstable. That unpredictability changes how survivors move through the world. People stop traveling alone if possible. Routes become carefully chosen. Daylight matters more. Familiarity matters more. Entire areas become avoided simply because too many stories circulate about danger there. Rumors themselves become powerful after month 3 because information systems no longer function reliably. People rely on word of mouth again. Stories spread through communities slowly, changing slightly each time they travel. A violent encounter somewhere nearby. A safe water source discovered miles away. A functioning trade group operating in another town. Information becomes survival resource now, but verifying truth becomes difficult. That uncertainty increases psychological tension constantly. Some survivors become highly territorial during this stage, because territory now equals access to resources and security. Homes become defended spaces emotionally as much as physically. Communities begin recognizing familiar faces automatically and distrusting unfamiliar ones. Human beings evolved in tribal environments for most of history, and collapse slowly reactivates many of those instincts. But interestingly, the groups that survive longest are usually not the most aggressive ones. They're the most stable, the groups capable of maintaining internal trust. Because long-term survival punishes chaos harshly. Violent groups often burn through resources and emotional stability quickly. Constant paranoia destroys cooperation. Fear weakens communities from inside. Groups that remain calm, organized, and adaptable generally endure longer, because stability itself becomes one of the rarest resources after collapse. Leadership changes too. Before collapse, authority often came from institutions, titles, positions, systems. After month 3, leadership becomes practical instead of symbolic. People naturally follow whoever reduces uncertainty. The calm person during conflict. The one who solves problems instead of creating them. The one who conserves resources carefully. Emotional stability becomes leadership trait because frightened communities desperately search for predictability. And survivors begin noticing something psychologically important. Calmness spreads. So does panic. One emotionally unstable person can increase fear inside an entire group quickly. But one calm person capable of rational thinking during stress can stabilize everyone nearby. That's why emotionally adaptable survivors become extremely valuable after long-term collapse. They preserve not only themselves, but the psychological stability of the people around them. Children especially depend on this emotional stability. Kids adapt surprisingly fast to difficult environments when adults remain emotionally controlled. But unstable adults create unstable children quickly because fear spreads socially. Communities with structure, routine, and calm leadership generally protect children better psychologically, even when physical conditions remain difficult. Over time, some survivor groups begin recreating routines from the old world intentionally because routine reduces anxiety. Shared meals, rotating responsibilities, quiet evening conversations, simple education for children. Tiny rituals become emotionally important because they remind people they are still human beings instead of simply survivors. And that becomes one of the deepest psychological battles after month 3. Preserving humanity, not biologically, emotionally. The longer collapse continues, the easier it becomes for people to emotionally shrink into pure survival instinct. Food, security, sleep, repeat. Communities that survive longest usually find ways to preserve meaning beyond immediate survival. Purpose, responsibility, connection. Without those things, emotional burnout eventually destroys people even if physical resources remain available. That's why experienced survivors slowly begin changing their mindset completely after enough time passes. Because eventually, survival stops being about waiting for the old world to return and starts becoming about learning how to live inside the new one. After enough time passes, experienced survivors stop thinking like ordinary people entirely. Not because they become emotionless, but because long-term collapse rewires priorities slowly. The old habits of modern life begin disappearing one by one. Convenience disappears first, then entertainment, then long-term planning. Eventually, even comfort itself stops feeling necessary. Survival after month 3 changes people because it forces the human mind to separate needs from illusions. And once that separation happens, daily life becomes quieter, more deliberate, more controlled. Experienced survivors move differently now. They waste less motion, speak less unnecessarily. They conserve energy constantly because they understand something most people don't realize during the beginning of collapse. Long-term survival is not won through dramatic action. It's won through consistency. The ability to avoid mistakes day after day while the environment slowly wears everyone down. That mindset changes routines completely. Morning starts before sunrise for many survivors because daylight becomes resource. Water collection happens early. Fires are managed carefully before smoke becomes too visible. Supplies get counted repeatedly, not from paranoia alone, but because accurate knowledge reduces uncertainty. Small routines become psychologically essential because routine creates stability in a world where almost nothing else feels stable anymore. And stability becomes emotional survival. People who adapt best after month 3 are usually the ones who accept repetitive routines without emotionally resisting them. Carrying water every day, maintaining shelter every day, conserving heat every day. The work never truly ends. That's one of the hardest realities for modern people to emotionally process. Civilization normally hides maintenance behind systems. Collapse exposes how much constant labor survival actually requires. Everything breaks eventually. Clothing wears down, shoes deteriorate, containers crack, tools rust, and replacing those things becomes increasingly difficult over time. That's why experienced survivors become extremely careful with possessions. Objects regain importance in ways modern society forgot long ago. A durable backpack, a reliable lighter, waterproof clothing, strong boots, small practical items begin carrying enormous emotional value because replacement is uncertain. Waste starts feeling almost painful psychologically because resources now represent future survival directly. Food habits change deeply too. Experienced survivors stop eating emotionally and start eating strategically. Calories become scheduled. Portions become controlled automatically. Meals become tied to labor and weather conditions. People begin understanding their bodies differently because survival forces awareness. How much energy walking long distances actually costs. How dehydration affects thinking. How cold increases calorie burn. The body becomes something survivors manage carefully instead of taking for granted. And over time, survivors become quieter internally too. One of the strangest parts of long-term collapse is how much unnecessary mental noise disappears. Modern civilization floods people with stimulation constantly. News, advertising, notifications, entertainment, endless opinions and distractions. After enough months without those systems, the mind changes pace. Thoughts slow down. Attention narrows toward immediate reality. Some survivors describe this as emotionally exhausting at first, then strangely clarifying later. Because collapse strips life down to fundamentals: heat, water, food, sleep, safety, human connection. Everything else fades into the background. And once people emotionally adapt to that simplicity, they begin seeing the old world differently in memory. The speed of modern life starts feeling unnatural, wasteful, loud. Many survivors stop missing luxury itself and start missing predictability instead. Reliable systems, safe sleep, trust between strangers. The emotional security civilization quietly provided every day. That's why emotional control becomes one of the most valuable survival skills after month 3. Not optimism, not toughness. Control. The ability to stay calm while uncertainty continues indefinitely. Because panic destroys decision-making. Fear spreads socially. Despair drains motivation. Experienced survivors learn to manage emotions the same way they manage supplies. Not by becoming emotionless, but by preventing emotion from controlling behavior. And that emotional discipline changes communities too. People speak more carefully now. Conflict becomes dangerous because instability spreads quickly inside small groups. One broken relationship can create enormous risk. That's why the communities that survive longest usually develop quiet emotional rules. Stay calm. Share useful information clearly. Avoid unnecessary arguments. Protect group stability whenever possible. Survival after month 3 becomes collective psychology. A calm community survives better than a frightened one. A structured group survives better than a chaotic one. And experienced survivors understand this because they've already watched unstable people collapse emotionally over time. Some become aggressive. Some withdraw completely. Some stop caring. Others become reckless because hopelessness removes fear of consequences. But the survivors who endure usually protect something small but incredibly important. Purpose. Not grand purpose, simple purpose. Protecting family, maintaining routines, repairing shelter, growing food, teaching useful skills. Purpose stabilizes the human mind because purpose creates direction even when the future remains uncertain. And eventually, many survivors stop thinking in terms of returning to the old world at all. That idea fades quietly, not because they forget civilization, because emotionally, waiting becomes exhausting. At some point, survivors realize something difficult. This is life now, not temporary emergency life, just life. And once that realization settles into communities, human behavior transforms again. Gardens become larger. Shelters become more permanent. Trade becomes organized. Children begin learning survival routines as normal behavior instead of emergency behavior. That transition marks the true psychological end of the old world, not when systems failed, when people stopped emotionally expecting normality to return. After enough time passes, experienced survivors begin changing psychologically. The constant stress, uncertainty, and exhaustion reshape how people think about life itself. Survivors stop thinking about getting through collapse and start thinking about maintaining stability inside it. Because by now, everyone understands the same thing. Collapse is no longer an event, it's an environment. And environments change people. Experienced survivors wake up differently now. Less panic, less urgency. Tasks happen automatically because routine has replaced improvisation. Water gets checked. Heat gets checked. Supplies get counted. Not from paranoia alone, but because predictable routines reduce psychological stress. That's why routines become sacred after month 3. Morning routines, night routines, food routines, security routines. Without structure, the mind drifts toward exhaustion and anxiety. And the people who fail to create structure often deteriorate emotionally much faster. One of the biggest differences between short-term emergencies and long-term collapse is mental fatigue. During short emergencies, people tolerate chaos because they expect recovery. But when instability lasts for months, the nervous system wears down slowly. That's why experienced survivors avoid unnecessary conflict, avoid unnecessary travel, avoid emotional overreaction. Calmness becomes survival skill, not because calm people are fearless, because panic wastes resources, aggression wastes resources, despair wastes resources. And over time, communities begin organizing around emotionally stable people instead of physically dominant ones. The loudest people rarely last longest after collapse. The calmest usually do. The people capable of adapting quietly. The people who solve problems instead of emotionally reacting to them. Observation also becomes essential after month 3. Experienced survivors notice environmental changes immediately. Smoke somewhere unusual. Dogs barking repeatedly. A different smell in the air. Human awareness sharpens because modern systems no longer absorb danger for people. And that awareness changes sleep permanently for many survivors. Deep sleep becomes rare. People wake easily now. Listen automatically. Check surroundings instinctively. Hypervigilance becomes normal because the nervous system no longer fully trusts the environment. But despite all this tension, something unexpected also happens. Humans adapt emotionally, not happily, not comfortably, but effectively. The routines that once felt unbearable slowly become ordinary. Carrying water no longer feels shocking. Darkness no longer feels unusual. Cold mornings no longer create panic. And that adaptation creates a strange divide between survivors and the memory of the old world. The old world begins feeling emotionally distant. Endless entertainment, consumer culture, constant noise. Many survivors begin realizing how psychologically overloaded modern life actually was. Collapse strips existence down to fundamentals so aggressively that previous priorities lose emotional importance. Status disappears. Trends disappear. Online identity disappears. What remains are human fundamentals. Shelter, trust, stability, purpose. And purpose becomes one of the most important psychological survival tools after month 3. The survivors who lose all sense of purpose often deteriorate quickly, even if resources remain available. Humans need meaning almost as much as food. That's why experienced survivors attach themselves to practical responsibilities. Protecting children, growing food, repairing systems, maintaining group stability. Purpose creates forward movement psychologically, even when the future remains uncertain. And eventually, communities begin rebuilding something unexpected. Not civilization exactly, but rhythm, shared routines, trade patterns, quiet forms of cooperation. People adapt because human beings have always adapted. Throughout history, civilizations have collapsed repeatedly, and survivors always reorganized around smaller systems. Local trust, practical labor, shared survival. That realization changes how survivors think about the future. At first, people wait emotionally for rescue, for systems to return, for normal life. But after enough time passes, experienced survivors stop emotionally living in the past because comparison becomes exhausting. Instead, they begin thinking differently. How to survive winter, how to preserve water, how to maintain trust, how to avoid burnout, how to protect children emotionally. The future becomes smaller but more real. And eventually, survival no longer feels temporary. It feels permanent. That realization changes human beings forever. And eventually, after enough months pass, something happens that most people never imagined during the beginning of collapse. The fear changes again. Not because danger disappears, because the human mind cannot survive in constant emergency forever. At some point, survivors stop emotionally reacting to collapse every single day. The routines become familiar. The silence becomes familiar. Even the exhaustion becomes familiar. Because once humans adapt to survival long enough, survival stops feeling temporary. It just feels normal. That's the moment the old world truly dies psychologically. Not when the lights went out. When people stopped expecting things to go back. One morning, someone wakes up and no longer reaches for their phone automatically, not because the battery died, because emotionally, they already know there will be no message waiting, no update, no rescue. And once enough people reach that point, entire communities begin changing again. People stop saying, until things get normal again. Now they say, next winter, next harvest. The future becomes smaller, more local, more uncertain. And strangely, that smaller life changes people deeply. Many survivors become calmer over time. Not happier, calmer. Because once the noise of modern civilization disappears long enough, humans begin appreciating things they once ignored. Warmth, clean water, a full night without fear, a meal shared safely. Small things regain enormous emotional value because survival strips life down to fundamentals. And after enough time passes, survivors realize something uncomfortable about the old world. Most people were psychologically dependent on systems they barely understood. Electricity, supply chains, hospitals, transportation, collapse forces, survivors to see how fragile normal life actually was. Children born into long-term collapse adapt the fastest psychologically because they barely remember the old world at all. Darkness feels normal to them. Water collection feels normal. Survival routines become childhood routines. And that realization becomes emotionally devastating for adults because civilization is no longer paused. It's gone, at least the version they knew. And eventually, survivors understand the hardest truth of all. The real survival battle after month 3 is not against the environment. It's against psychological erosion, the slow wearing down of human emotion under constant instability. And the people who endure are usually the ones who protect small things carefully. Routine, purpose, trust, connection. Tiny pieces of normal human behavior preserved inside abnormal conditions. Because civilization was never just technology, it was human behavior. And as long as some people still protect that behavior, part of civilization survives too, even in darkness, even after collapse, even after month 3. And before we end this documentary, if you're someone interested in building a faceless YouTube channel like this one and earning from videos like these, there is a way some creators speed up the monetization process. instead of waiting months to reach 4,000 watch hours and 1,000 subscribers. They use a service that helps them reach those requirements much faster. If you want to learn more about it, you can check the link in the description. If this video changed the way you think about long-term survival, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with the survival habit you think people would struggle with most after month 3. Because surviving the collapse is one thing, living inside it for months is something completely different. Thanks for watching.